Grand Rising. Volume too high. Grand Rising. Hope all are doing well. Grand Rising. Still too loud.
Grand Rising, everyone.
Grand Rising to the panel, to the chat, and those who are listening.
Grand Rising free. Grand Rising bones. Grand Rising no sellout.
Who that? Peace, y'all. Peace, everybody. Peace to the chat. Peace to the family.
If everybody in the chat could go ahead and give us some ones to make sure we're coming through loud and clear and everyone can be heard, that'd be great. Mic check 1, 2. Can y'all hear us out there? There we go.
Good to see you all out this rising.
I know, right? Thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's go ahead and greet the people in the chat. Grand Rising Mike Easton. Grand Rising Brittany Davis. Grand Rising Copper Colored Queen. Grand Rising Ladarian Woods. Grand Rising Big Hawk. Grand Rising Pamela Hall. Grand Rising Doodoo Vision, aka Choctaw Jimmy. Grand Rising Oak Cliff. Grand Rising Enrique. I guess I'll say Grand Rising no sellout.
Yeah.
So hopefully everyone had a great weekend. And everyone's doing well this Monday rising. So how everybody's say again, Bones?
No, I was just being funny about to say define well now. What's well?
You have that container that water is in, that's in the ground. You have those things that are mammals that are in the ocean.
I like how we did that. Across the phonetic board.
What happened? What I missed?
Okay, touche. Who's my bad? Let me stop with that French. Let me stop.
You can't help it. It's all around
everywhere. Permeated by it. Ugh.
Grand Rising, Macadam 1.
Macadam, Grand Rising.
So let's go ahead and get started with the public service announcement so we can go ahead and get moving. Everybody with a ratchet, go ahead and start handing out those hard hats with the triple reinforced chin straps. And the new overall gear that protects you from falling cinder blocks, because you're going to need it this rising. So while y'all handing that out, we're going to do the public service announcement.
Before you do that, I meant to say it last night when we was listening to a recording. I can officially say a year ago I heard you say the ratchet.
I know, right?
I meant to say it last night, but it slipped my mind. When he said it, it just came back to me.
Really? Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, we still gonna get at the Mr. TJ for reminding us that we called it ratchets. So
thank you, Mr. TJ.
Thank you, Mr. TJ. Hopefully you listen in if you haven't been able to get in on the chat. Also, I would like to welcome the new subscribers and welcome those to the chat who are listening, who make up the larger part of the audience, who just receive the information and use it to the benefit of themselves and their community and hopefully their tribes. So we want to welcome you. Don't ever want to forget you. With that being said, this episode of the Cab Grand Rising Show is brought to you, which one? Brought to you, right? Tactless Assembly, where the real work gets done. A Tactless Assembly is the gathering of the minds that do the work. And for those of you who are new to the show, you may be wondering, who are a Autochthonous Assembly. And we are a non-profit organization dedicated to raising up Indigenous Americans' voices by using genealogy, also known as family history or family tree, which is a study of families and the tracing of their lineage and history. Genealogists use oral interviews, historical records, genetic analysis, and other records to obtain information about a family and to demonstrate kinship and pedigrees of its members. And like all organizations have, we also have our core values, and that is the foundation of our company, which is essential to our success and serve the lens through which we evaluate every business decision. And those core values are, but are not limited to, integrity, which is knowing and doing what is right; respect, which is treating others the way you want to be treated; responsibility, which is embracing opportunities to contribute; servant leadership, which is serve the common good. And here at the Autochthonous Assembly, our mission, first and foremost, is to help you complete your family tree, or at least get your family tree to the point where you know exactly where you came from, at least 4 generations back. That's the goal. And if that leads to you finding out that you are African, cool. If it leads to you finding out that you are American Indian or Native American, cool. If it helps you find out that a large part of your family is Black, Dutch, Black, Irish, Huguenot, or what have you, cool. Our goal is to help you with your genealogy. That's our first mission. Our second mission is to help those who choose to become financially independent so that they can take care of their relatives, their immediate relatives in their community. And our third mission is to help those that wish to connect with their tribe, and help them, meaning their tribe, become financially independent. We're not saying, intimating, or hinting that you must be part of a tribe to become financially independent or to receive our help. That is not what we're saying. What we are saying is that the best way that we know of to find out who you are is to tie back to your tribe. We're not here to tell you who you are. We are not here to tell you who you are not. And we are not here to get into your public affairs or your business. And the only time that we will bring up issues that are outside of our scope is if someone in the chat or someone sends us an email and asks us for clarification. And if we feel it is benefit, we will post it, or Bones will do a video on it. With that being said, I turn it back over to the panel to correct or to add anything that I missed. Back to you guys and gals. Really?
Man, you nothing.
Covered that
Covered
terrain
everything.
well.
Had some practice. Grand Rising, Marlon P. Grand Rising, Carrie Bay.
Grand Rising.
Oh, I forgot. We got a couple of announcements to make as well.
So handle it.
We gotta let the relatives know AINT is here. AINT stands for American Indian Network Television, and you can access it now from the Autochthonous Assembly website. Again, that's American Indian Network Television. You can access it from the Autochthonous Assembly website, 24-hour television, completely free.
Okay, stop. What that mean? Explain, please.
Basically, once CAB go off, people want to catch other CAB episodes or informative episodes or any information that we have displayed, it's on our television programming.
So we have our own television station, basically.
Yep. Running 24/7. 7 days a week, 365. Also to add that there's USDA information posted on the forum now. So for individuals looking for grant information for your areas and your neighborhoods, that's also posted on the forum as well.
That's what's up.
community movie night. Anyone? Can we do a community movie night?
Hey, we was talking about it.
Sounds good to me.
Grand Rising Alpha, Prince William County
Rising,
represent.
sis.
Prince William County represent.
And not to mention, we're setting up for a special build on the website this Saturday, an exclusive build for the community on the website.
Aha. Grand Rising Mark Walton. Hope all is doing well. Hope you had a fantastic, phenomenal weekend, as well as everyone else. Pamela Hall said, that's great. Well, at the end of the day, it's about getting the work done, like we've always talked about, and encouraging people in the community to do the same thing. If we're not moving and growing, then we can't expect for people in the community to be doing anything or being productive or moving and growing. So that's what we're here for. Again, like we've always stated, YouTube is merely a mechanism or a platform that allows us to get this information out to you. The real growth and the real change happens in your communities. The real growth and the real change happens with the people that you know and that you touch. And like Bones always says before we sign off, all this information does us no good if no one uses it. And it does us no good if we're not being in the front lines doing the work, being that example. So, being that we're a nonprofit organization, our goal is to continue to strive and set that example for y'all. So, Pamela Hall says, did we receive her email? Let me check.
I was actually checking right now.
Okay, no sellout is checking, Pamela Hall. Pamela Hall, we need to get with you because we may have some assignments for you. We got a proposal for you. I think you might enjoy it. All right. So Bones.
Mm-hmm.
You ready to do this?
Like we do at this time.
I don't know if I'm ready. I'm double and triple checking my equipment. So let's go ahead and set the area, clear the site. Give me a few seconds, and we'll go. I'll post the links in the chat. So it's time for a warning, y'all.
Warning, warning, warning. Hard hats, pickaxe, shovels, boots required.
That's the first warning. Y'all know what comes next. Y'all gotta know that y'all in a construction area. Alright. Hopefully you got your equipment on. Hopefully you got your hard hat strapped on. You got your pickaxe. You got your front end loaders and your backhoes. Cause yeah. It's about to get interesting. So Bones, we're still talking about Reconstruction and the effect it has had on our ancestors, the copper-colored American Indian. And thanks to the research that's been going on, you found some interesting information. You care to briefly touch on that?
Oh, give me 1 second. 1 second.
Okay. So as y'all can see, I mean, y'all in the chat can see, and for those that are listening, the title of the show is Huguenots and the KKK with the question mark. Now, we're not saying that all Huguenots were members of the KKK. What we have learned is that some, not all, but some members of the KKK, some very prominent members of the KKK, were Huguenots. And the goal is to expose the chat to how this further affected our ancestors and how the land was stolen. We came across some information that was very specific and detailed to how this happened. And yeah, strap on your hard hats. That's like Ladarian Wood says, gear up, because it's gonna be very interesting.
Well, I made it back.
Okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. No, I was talking to the chat and letting them know that you came across some very interesting information concerning Reconstruction and, you know, the KKK and how it affected our ancestors and the role that they played in, I guess for lack of a better term, specific organizations that were responsible, and I don't want to say single-handedly, but had a large part to do with our ancestors losing their land. You care to share that information?
Yeah, correct. Well, most of the chat know over the weekend we dived in heavily, researching a lot of topics, and going through the Reconstruction, came across a couple of laws and societies that had their hands, you know, heavily wrapped into this. Like this rising, we're going to go over 2 acts that we learned about. The 2 confiscation acts that Congress passed, which was the mechanism that allowed them to confiscate a lot of our ancestors' land. Even some of the freedmen's land. What it stated, over 80 plantations.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
And Copper said he's on his way, so he'll be chiming in. He has some information as well. Do you want me to go ahead and put in a link about the 1868 massacre?
Yeah, we can start with the massacre first. Yeah.
All right, I'll put that in the chat. So it's called the Opelousas Massacre. And it occurred on September 28th, 1868 in Opelousas, St. Landry Parish, Louisiana. And it says, beginning with the execution of 27 black prisoners, whites conducted widespread attacks on African Americans. So let's stop right quick. The first thing it reads is, it began with the execution of 27 black prisoners. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we already know that during this time frame, you have a large group of individuals or people that were defined as black. Black Irish, Black Dutch, your Métis, your Creole, your Cajuns, your people of color, even our own copper-colored American Indians who declared Black Dutch and Black Irish because they wanted to keep their land and purchase land held for Europeans. So they say that beginning with the execution of 27 black prisoners. Then it goes on to read, whites conducted widespread attacks of African Americans. So why are they separating black prisoners from African Americans? Are they separate groups? We got to keep in mind the agenda, and they're trying to lump everybody and make them seem like they're the same people. So then it goes on to read, it says they were believed to have killed up to 200 to 300 at the time. It said whites referred to the event as the Appaloosa riot, as if caused by an outbreak of violence by blacks, and minority historians continue to refer to it by this name. So let's go into the history a little bit. Prior to the elections in the fall of 1868, some African Americans from Appaloosa attempted to join the Democratic Party political group, organized in a neighboring large town of Washington. Now, can anybody tell me why in the 1800s, specifically 1868, why melanated people or swarthy people joining the Democratic Party would be considered an issue during this time period, unlike now? Can anybody tell me? Well, first reason is because the Democratic Party at this time were your Southerners who were pro-slavery, and they were against anything or any advancement of swarthy people. So, can you imagine the outrage that would happen for, at this particular time, African Americans wanted to join a Democrat Party? That's like somebody wanting to join the KKK, literally. So, just wanted to set that out there for you before we finish reading. Then I'm gonna turn it over to Copper, who's here now. So let me finish reading this part. So then it goes on to read, in response, Emerson Bentley, an 18-year-old born white school teacher and editor of the Landry Progress, a Republican newspaper in Appaloosa, wrote an article that described the attack by Seymour Knight against the black Democrats. He suggested that such events should persuade blacks to remain loyal to the Republican Party. Did y'all hear that?
Based on what?
It wasn't trying to run you away.
Now think about this. Nowadays, it is assumed, and I use air quotes, that most of us swarthy people, I like that term, so I'm gonna start using it, are Democrats, right? And the white people are Republicans. So somewhere this switched. But anyway, at this particular time in the 1860s, the swarthy people, including our ancestors, are loyal to the Republican Party. And it goes on to read that Bentley was known as an advocate of education for the children of the freedmen and the Creole people of color who had been free before the war. He also helped adult men of color of both groups to register to vote. Stop. Again, they're separating classes of people right before our eyes, and many of us may or may not be paying attention. So he says he was an advocate of education for the children of freedmen and the Creole people of color who had been free before the war. He also
they're separating Creole people into two groups now.
Ladarian Wood said, I noticed that. And this is it. And the reason why this is important is so that we don't keep falling for the banana in the tailpipe or the lectio difficilior, the difficilior.
over some trigger words.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right.
So you will hear us continue to make us aware of these instances. So then it goes on to read that Bentley, as it says, shortly after the article appeared, Bentley was assaulted at his class by 3 white men and severely beaten. Afterward, Bentley quickly fled town and ran for his life to reach the north. So he ran to the north thinking that was going to provide him some relief and some assistance. Boy, are you going to find out how wrong he was. Due to Bentley's sudden disappearance, reports circulated that the teacher had been killed because of this article. Several local armed African Americans band together to retaliate and march toward the county seat of Appaloosa. So hold on. It says this is one of the first times I've seen where, outside of us being talked about as Indians, they talk about swarthy people having arms. And so they band together to retaliate and march toward the county seat of Appaloosa. Some left the march when they learned that Bentley had not been murdered. The armed blacks were met by armed whites determined to defend their town, many of whom had been rallied by the Knights of the White Camellia. And we'll go over them later. This says, due to local laws restricting gun ownership by blacks, the white Democrats had the overwhelming advantage in weapons as well as in numbers. Shooting broke out on both sides and the whites captured 29 black prisoners. On September 29th, all the captured prisoners was taken from the prisons and executed, with the exception of 2 men. The dead included the 12 black Republican leaders. I'm going to say that again. On September 29th, all the captured prisoners was taken from the prison and executed with the exception of 2 men. The dead included 12 black Republican leaders.
Replacements.
After the whites continued attacks on blacks in St. Landry Parish for weeks, killed them on the street and county and country roads, historians have disputed the total death toll of the massacre, and accounts at the time were just subject to controversy. 3 white Republicans and 2 Democrats were killed in the initial assault in Appaloosa. Republicans said that around 200 to 300 blacks were killed in total by white insurgents, but the Democrats said this claim was fraudulent and approximately 25 to 30 African Americans were killed in addition to those prisoners murdered in September. It also reported that 30 to 50 whites were killed. Many historians of the early 21st century have concluded that the Republicans' estimate was more accurate given the death toll in similar events. So, here's something I need y'all to understand. And this is the reason why I find it laughable when they talk about slavery the way it talks about. Now, according to this own narrative, and I'm gonna relinquish the mic to Copper. According to this narrative, the black Republicans, the black leaders, the African American people, the swarthy people went out of their town and went into the town where the majority of the whites were heavily outgunned, right? So the whites had the advantage. And according to the numbers that the historians say is more accurate, 25 to 30 African Americans were killed, while 30 to 50 whites were killed. I'm gonna read that number again.
Funny math again. That funny math.
Macadon 1 says, well, it was a republic before a democracy, right? Yeah, Macadon 1, you'll find out that the Republicans and Democrats switch roles at a specific point in time. But I wanted to say this again. For those that paint the narrative that our ancestors were some weak people that just let somebody whip on them. Let's look at this from the historian standpoint, and this is Wikipedia, so you can do the research. You got swarthy people who are upset because somebody they thought had got killed. So they go into town where the majority of these white people are with their guns and they're armed. Some leave because they found out that the reporter was not killed. So that means the numbers they originally went with lessened. According to the reports, they are outgunned and outmanned. But they go in this town and kill more whites than whites kill them. 30 to 50 or 25 to 30. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Grand Rising Copper.
Grand Rising and peace to the panel, the chat, and everybody tuned in. This is a very important discussion, and this is a very, I would say, apropos. I know it's a big word. Apropos topic based on where we ended last week with ReCONstruction. Now, with what we've been seeing with these groups is we've been seeing, as you can see in the Wikipedia article, we have disputes over the narrative of how things went down. And you're going to start to see that as these not only with the Union and the Confederacy, but you're going to start seeing the political parties that represent these groups, after the Union is rejoined, start to define opposing narratives. And you guys will begin to see how this plays out once we get into the education system and we start to trace back and expose how we ended up all of a sudden being, all of us being descendants of slaves, and all of us ended up being African American, so-called. This is part of the beginning of that. Yes, our people were reclassified. Yes, our people were moved around and put into wards or essentially makeshift reservations or internment camps that turned into boroughs and neighborhoods. But this is part of how we get to where we are now. This is some of the beginning stages of it. To take notes as well of, let me get my bearings right. In the Opelousas massacre, the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau is going to play into this because this is part of where you have essentially a group that a part of the government that is designed for what we were reclassified as. And you're seeing a deliberate push to neutralize this by people who had become agitated about what was going on in places like this in Opelousas.
So you said the Freedmen's Bureau plays an instrumental role in this?
Yes, because you have the funding, which was allocated for freedmen or people who were classified as freedmen around this time in the mid 1800s in the Freedmen's Bank. So there was money tied to the land, tied to the commodities, tied to all of the things that so-called freedmen owned. There was a deliberate attempt by the successors to Abraham Lincoln and his cohorts, and many of which who are parts of the Knights of the White Camellia, the Ku Klux Klan, Knights of the Golden Circle, that at the time were adamant about diffusing the funds that were in the Freedmen's Bank, diffusing the Freedmen's Bureau. We don't talk about the Freedmen's Bureau today. Why is this? If we're all supposed to be children of said freedmen, what happened? You didn't disappear, did we? So we had to start asking, well, what happened to this part of the institution? What happened to the Freedmen's Bank? And this will start showing you where you begin to see what we now know as systemic racism. This was done to make a play to expand the influence of certain people in this nation and beyond. We didn't finish the atmosphere of the time part of this article, did we?
The time frame is 1868, and that's pretty much all we talked about was the Appaloosa riot. We didn't go any further than that.
Okay, let me go into this part right here because I think this is going to begin to start tying things together. The atmosphere of the time. Post-war period was one of widespread violence in the South. As whites struggled to assert the dominance over the freedmen to regain their political power. A majority of the newly freed African Americans strongly supported the Republican Party, which had achieved their emancipation. This angered Southern Democrats who did not want to give up any political power, especially to the party that had defeated them at war. The war was considered to continue by insurgents who worked for white supremacy and killed hundreds, if not thousands, of blacks and their sympathizers before the end of ReCONstruction. The Ku Klux Klan, or KKK, rapidly developed chapters across the South, but such groups as the Knights of the White Camellia, the Red Shirts, and the White Rifle Clubs were also active. Such whites sought to suppress African Americans and those who supported them through various scare tactics, physical violence, and murder. First of all, as we read these articles, Wikipedia, we have to understand Wikipedia is a very large repository of information. And we're seeing information that's being taken from certain sources. But you're going to see, as we look through these documents, as we look through these write-ups of accounts of history, this wasn't the case back then, but as people word things now, you keep seeing blacks and African Americans interchangeable. Why is that? Because on one hand, you're seeing our people referred to as blacks. On the other end, you're seeing them referred to as African Americans. There was no African American in the mid-1800s, not as we know it today. Why do they keep using these terms interchangeably? There's something going on here. There's a convolution of people. And what we have to understand is the push to do this and marginalize these people, which wasn't going on decades before, mind you. They call this period before the Civil War antebellum for a reason. Bellum is war. There was no war. Why was there no war if people were being oppressed to this rate? You have to ask yourself, this is part of how you break free of this slave narrative. Because if all our people were slaves, how were they in such peaceful slavery up until some other folks decided, hey, this isn't right, we need to stop it? That's nonsense. Not everybody was treated like this. Not everybody was seen or classified as chattel, like they would have you believe in some of these slave narratives and period pieces about slavery. Okay. You also have to understand the difference between immigrants from Africa and the indigenous people. I'm preaching to the choir, so I know you guys already know this. I'm not trying to suggest that you guys don't understand it. But we have to make sure as we read this stuff, we remember the difference between the two. Because how many people came from other places, but because of their classification as white, even if they did come from Africa, were trying to join these groups? Another thing, with what we're seeing here is we're seeing a bunch of smaller groups. See, we all refer to these people as the Ku Klux Klan, but look at how their chapters become their own splinter groups. These splinter groups, based on their location, become, over time, as we're going to see later on, they become part of your police force, your state and local police. Not to say that all police are bad. That's not to say that the whole institution is corrupt, but these people did infiltrate. Many of these people were found to be in positions of authority in various police forces over the course of the next 100 years after this point and beyond. So while they would go and work as upstanding citizens during the day.
Oh, hold on, Copper. You just can't say that. You just can't say that and you just gloss over that, bro. You gotta repeat that part one more again about who ended up becoming the police department. I'm just saying. I'm going back on mute.
All right. So what you end up having, as this article points out, you end up having local chapters. Because Ku Klux Klan, because of its expansive interests and because of its influence, recruited a lot of people to this cause across the South, right? And as all of these folks began to group up at a local level, these chapters sprung up. The White Knights of Community, the Red Shirts, Rifle Club, White Rifle Clubs, Knights of the Golden Shirt, like all of these groups. And as these local chapters grew and began to take hold, many of these people infiltrated police departments at the state and local level. So when you see what you see during the civil rights period, you see a lot of these people who were, again, during the day, upstanding law enforcement, but at night put on their masks and their hoods and their robes and wouldn't burn crosses. Now consider, and speaking of which, consider not only how these people infiltrated law enforcement and infiltrated other parts of the government, people who enforce policy of the police, okay? But also, when you look at how they operate, what scare tactics they used to convince. Remember, they weren't using scare tactics just because they didn't like us. They were using scare tactics because they needed us to act a certain way in response. Mm-hmm. And you're going to find that, and as was mentioned in this article, you're going to find that there were people that were incentivized to make sure that our ancestors voted a certain way for a certain party. They ended up, as you can see, over time getting their way, but they tried using force initially and intimidation. That's the reason you have this. These racists are not overtly violent, and this is where people like David Duke and other people who've represented the Klan over the last few decades keep talking about how they're not violent. They're not violent people, because they're not necessarily. They just utilize that tactic to get people to vote a certain way until they realized they didn't need to use violence at all. Just like the Romans at some point realized they didn't have to fight wars. If they could just get into people's minds, they could get them to police themselves. So think about that next time you talk to a relative, or you turn on CNN or see somebody talking about a certain political party and how one political party is racist and the other one loves us. Do they really love us, or are they just trying to get our vote? Think about that.
Right, because when they get their vote, do they do anything for your community?
Exactly. See, they show up, and here's the thing. So I know some other folks who use that term. I try not to use it so much. But here's one thing that I thought was interesting, an interesting parallel. You have in Mexico, politicians would show up in a very impoverished community, and they would show up with construction crews, and they would have these propositions, these proposals to build a big community center, or build a road, or build infrastructure. And it looks great and it sounds great, and the people get behind it, and they vote said politician in. They say this guy's going to do something for us. After the election's over, the construction crew pretty much leave the construction site, and you end up with a half developed road, half-built buildings, things like that. Because they just want your vote. They're not really interested in doing anything for you or substance. Think about what in the 8 years of our 44th president, the many voted for because of how he looked. He looked like one of us. What do we get in return compared to other groups? A lot of people in that party that 44 was affiliated with got exactly what they wanted. And I don't begrudge them for that. They held him to account. They demanded that he do things for them. We didn't demand anything from him. We just said, we want you to go to the White House and we want you to strut and we want you to look good in that suit. We're fine with whatever you do. How many of our people voted for him because he looked like us and said, just represent how we look there. We don't care what you do. And matter of fact, we'll defend what you do. Okay? So we understand the party, the same party, the same influence that caused this massacre in Opelousas, okay, are some of the same people running political parties that claim to love you, that claim to be working in your interest. Think about all the politicians that look like us now in said party. I'm deliberately not using names. But think about all of these people that look like us, that's supposed to represent us, and they do nothing. They've been in Congress for decades, and they do nothing for our community. And they keep blaming white supremacy. They keep blaming what's now a straw man, that the same white supremacists run the party that these people are in. Some of them changed and switched sides. Some of them stayed. Okay. But you have to start looking around, because this is relevant today. This happened 150, 170-ish years ago. But this is still relevant today. We're dealing with the fallout and the causality of what we're reading right now. So, I'll yield the mic. If you guys have another link, we'll go ahead and get started with that, though.
Well, I didn't finish reading it. I wanted you to come in because I know you were pressed against time, so we wanted to make sure you came in and set the stage, so to speak. But you did a great job of. We definitely appreciate you for that. Is there anybody in the panel that want to say anything in reference to that? Before y'all do, sorry, I want to say Grand Rising to Antonio Batiste and Golden Moon. Hopefully y'all are able to keep up with what's going on. We're talking about the Reconstruction era and how the Huguenots infiltrated the KKK and how they used the Reconstruction era to specifically affect our ancestors, the copper-colored American Indian, who were now claiming to be Black Dutch and Black Irish, and who fall up under the 14th Amendment. So Copper was setting the stage as to pay attention to what's going on, and let's not be so quick to fall for what they put in print, but to deconstruct it and look at how they're using it, and how we started to look at how racism was created in this construct and how we fell for it. So thanks, Copper. We appreciate you for that. And anytime that you want to cut in and say something, please feel free to do so. So phones free. Y'all got anything that y'all want to say before we move forward, or is there anything that y'all want to focus on and want us to pay attention to?
No, not at this point. When you was finished with that section, I was going to read out of the First Confiscation Act.
Okay. I still got to
put a light on what put a little bit more light on what you're reading and what Copper India was saying, how it ties in.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go back and finish it. I'm on let's see. I'm on the atmosphere. No, we're talking about the Freedmen's Bureau, which ties into what Copper was talking about. So I'm gonna also put in the link for the Freedmen's Bureau. Hold on. That way, y'all, I have it. That was one of the links that I did not put in the forum, so, but it will be in the forum. So, all right.
Oh, just a moment to give a shout out to Macadon One. He just emailed us a picture. I'm gonna put it up on the website. It says extracted from the Reconstruction of Louisiana. It's a picture of all the melanated representatives. All right, back that up, Macadon. I'll get it up on the website.
If you put it in the back chat, I can share it so everybody can see it.
All right, I'll send you the link now.
All right.
Shout out.
You're looking out, Macadon.
That's why we have the best chat on YouTube.
Ever.
Hands down.
Where the real work gets done.
I'm like, where that voice come from?
And this is the reason why it is worthwhile. I'm sorry if I could just add this.
Go ahead.
Worthwhile. Thank you. It's worthwhile to engage a chat in an audience like this because you guys are paying attention. A. B. The level of engagement is not like none that I've seen here on YouTube because we're not talking about video games. We're not talking about celebrity gossip. We're talking about serious stuff that actually impacts people, that actually reveals our history. And the fact that you guys have not, glazed over and gone to sleep and that you're engaged speaks volumes. Always remember that. I need the mic.
Very well said. I couldn't agree more.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And so you'll be able to see the picture that Macadon One posted. And we're going to put it in a forum. And give him credit for posting this. So give me a second. So it should be coming up shortly. There you go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in. See if I can. There we go.
Wow.
Cannot deny that these individuals were melanated.
And it always brings me back to this question. How can all these people be slaves with no rights and no voice, but they're voting in melanated candidates? Something's wrong.
See if I can make it a little bit bigger.
And that's only for the state of Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, only Louisiana.
Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Exactly. And if you notice, most of them, if not all of them, have a significant amount of melanin. They are some very swarthy gentlemen. So this picture will be on the in the forum, so you'll be able to access it.
That is all of them. Not, I wouldn't even say majority. That's all of them.
I mean, I'm just trying to be fair and balanced, man. Trying to be fair and balanced. That's all I'm saying.
Leave that to the Fox News.
There you go.
Quote unquote.
Look, just because they said it first, don't mean they own it.
I'm just saying they said it and they ain't even doing it.
Okay, well, we say it and do it because this is where the work gets done. How about that?
Hey, Carper posted something real quick. I want to read real quick.
Go ahead, Bones. You got it.
It's called the White League. The White League, also known as the White Man's League, was a white paramilitary terrorist organization started in the southern United States in 1874 to intimidate freedmen from voting and politically organizing. Its first chapter was formed in Grant Parish, Louisiana, and neighboring parishes, and was made up of many of the Confederate veterans who had participated in Colfax Massacre in April of 1873. Chapters were soon founded in New Orleans and other areas of the state. It drops down. Members of the White League were absorbed into the state militias and National Guard.
Okay. Yeah.
Stop. Can you repeat that last sentence one more again? Thank you, sir.
Please.
Members of the White League were absorbed into state militias and the National Guard.
And what have your militias become? They have become your police force.
Say it again, Copper.
Your militias, your state militias and local level militias have become your police forces, your state and local police.
And haven't they used the National Guards for a lot of these civil rights and racial so-called issues?
Exactly.
The same ones that just stood there and watched.
Mm-hmm. The people
Now you
that
see
show
why.
up, the people that show up and are supposed to be, enforcing order again, enforcing the policy of the police, right? But they show up and they allow things to happen. As a matter of fact, go even further. Recent history, Charlottesville. There were more. More people don't know there were more police on the ground in Charlottesville than there were protesters, and yet all of that chaos was allowed to happen. Baltimore, Freddie Gray, allowed to happen. Mayor even admitted it. They allowed it to happen. Why? Why does the government stand back? The same government that taxes you, that says, pay us, give us your tax money, and in return, we'll protect you. And when things really get bad and you need to be protected from racists, from whoever, from the environment and the weather, they don't show up. Or if they do show up, they allow things to play out. And if they even try to exert any kind of order, that order is almost always against you. Why is this? This is why.
So the question could be asked, or should be asked, who are they really serving and protecting?
Exactly. It
is deep in the article he posted.
Mm-hmm.
It states, although sometimes linked to the secret vigilante groups, the Ku Klux Klan and White Knights and the Knights of White Camille, the White League and other paramilitary groups of the later 1870s marked a significant change. They operated openly in communities, solicited coverage from newspaper, and the men's identities were generally known. Similar paramilitary groups were chapters of the Red Shirts started in Mississippi, 1875, and activity also in the North and South Carolina. They had explicit political goals to overthrow the ReCONstruction government. They directed their activities toward intimidation and removal of Northern and African American Republican candidates and office holders. Made up of well-armed Confederate veterans, they worked to turn Republicans out of office, disrupt their political organizations, and use force to intimidate and terrorize freedmen to keep them from the polls. Backers helped finance purchases of up-to-date arms, Winchester rifles, Colt revolvers, and Persian needle guns.
Wow.
Says some sources charge the White League with the culpability for the Colfax massacre of 1873, but the organization was not established under that name until March 1874. Christopher Columbus Nash, a Confederate veteran, former prisoner of war at Johnson Island in Ohio, and the former sheriff of Grant Parish, led companies of white militias at Colfax to turn out Republican office holders and African Americans defending the courthouse. His forces killed up to 150 African Americans in Colfax massacre, an event in which 3 white men were killed, one possibly by friendly fire. Since the first unit of the White League, founded in 1874, was composed of members of Nash's force, mostly Confederate veterans who had participated in the Colfax massacre. It expressed its purpose to defend a hereditary civilization and Christianity menaced by a stupid Africanization. What?
What? What the fuck? Oh my God.
All right, I need a moment.
What's going on?
In 1874.
That's right over it too.
Don't you do it. Don't you do it. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. You got to read that part again.
Is Adolf Reed
It said it expressed its purpose to defend a hereditary civilization and Christianity menaced by a stupid Africanization. That's their words, word for word.
So this
menaced
is
by a stupid.
Mic check.
Go ahead.
1, 2.
Adolf Reed Jr. wrote that in June 1993, the Battle of Liberty Monument. So that's New Orleans, Louisiana, white supremacist statue.
Yep. What's that name again?
Adolf Reed Jr. Well, he just wrote,
As we continue.
Grand Rising Patrick Gable, hope all is well. Came in the middle of us talking about the deconstruction, reconstruction, the removal, the relocation of our ancestors, the copper-colored American Indians who were at this particular time declaring that they were Black, Dutch, and Black Irish to be able to maintain their lands and purchase lands designated for the Europeans. But what we're finding is that they're still going to be moved north.
Bone.
1, 2.
Yeah, go ahead.
You see that picture that they have for Julia Hayden, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you read about Julia Hayden, just think about that.
Yeah, that's the part that's going to get you to that. And you can send the picture to TMH.
Yeah, let me do that.
All right. While I read about her. It says in 1874, White League members murdered Julia Hayden, a 17-year-old African-American girl who was working as a school teacher in Hartsville, Tennessee. In his December 1874 State of the Union address, U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant expressed disdain over the White League's activities, condemning them for their violence and for violating the civil rights of freedmen. It has Ulysses' speech here. It says, I regret to say that with preparations for the late election decided, indications appeared in some localities in southern states of a determination by acts of violence and intimidation to deprive citizens of the freedom of the ballot because of their political opinions. Bands of men, masked and armed, made their appearance. White leagues and other societies were formed. Large quantities of arms and ammunition were imported and distributed to these organizations. Military drills with menacing demonstrations were held, and with all these murders, enough were committed to spread terror among those whose political action was to be suppressed, if possible, by those intolerant in criminal proceedings. Hold up. So the U.S. government knows that they're a terrorist group, knows who these people are, knows they got large quantities of arms and ammunition, know where they imported them and distributed them to them, know the name of all the organizations, and that they were doing military drills. And they were still able to pull this off?
Yep.
I can't get on a plane with a toothbrush. Somebody got to explain something.
Exactly. Where's the government when you really need it? And if I could point this out as well, a little bit further up in the Wikipedia article where it talks about the White League, when you see its you see its activity, you see its ideology, and so on and so forth. It's allies of the Ku Klux Klan, right? So now, do you see how so many people in the last century and into this one have been able to claim, I'm not a part of the KKK. I'm not a part of this group, because everybody lumps every group in with them. And so it makes it easier for them to not affiliate as that, even though they're doing the same things, they're putting the same robes on, they have the same ranks, all of the stuff is the same. It's a duck, it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, but you're gonna call it a goose. And it allows them to call themselves geese, excuse me. Right? And that way they get to skirt any scrutiny. Because if the government, let's say if the government in the name of actually, executing due diligence, calls out one of these groups and actually tries to prosecute these groups, well, they can just go hide in another affiliated allied group and say, we're not them. That makes them essentially untouchable. Prosecution. This is how you're able to see these people move around and claim no affiliation with any of these groups whatsoever and get away with it. This is how this was able to happen. Not only in this point here in the latter half of the 19th century, but beyond into current day.
Yeah.
I was pasting this link from the first Confiscation Act. I was going to read from it real quick, start tying in why they were able to do a lot of this.
So I'm gonna let you know right now. I'm gonna be interrupting you. So don't. So don't shoot me.
I'm posting in the chat. This is the first Confiscation Act. This is the Confiscation Act of 1861. It states the Confiscation Act of 1861 was an act of Congress during the early months of the American Civil War, permitting court proceedings for the confiscation of any of the property being used to support the Confederate independence efforts, including slaves. What part you want again?
Come on, man.
What part you want?
Man, you know what part. The confiscation of any property being what?
Let's run it from the top. It says the Confiscation Act of 1861 was an act of Congress during the early months of the American Civil War, permitting court proceedings for confiscation of any of property being used to support the Confederate independence effort, including slaves. Again, confiscation of any of property being used to support the Confederate independence efforts, including slaves.
Now remember when they talked about you can purchase land down south as long as you or your tribe had never raised a hand against the government. Remember that part?
Facts.
We were talking about that when it came to the migration and the tribes as they were moving, and why many of them moved, because many of them had raised a hand against the army, against the Union, and they knew they was gonna lose that land anyway. But then there were those who hadn't raised their arms against the military, and this act is allowing them to take said land anyway. So now you're going to see how they actually did it. I'm sorry, go ahead, Bones.
Okay, it goes on to state, the bill passed the House of Representatives 60-48, and in the Senate 24-11. Abraham Lincoln was reluctant to sign the act. He felt that in light of the Confederacy's recent battlefield victories, the bill would have no practical effect and might be seen as a desperate move. He was also worried that it could be struck down as unconstitutional, which would set a precedent that might derail future attempts at emancipation. Only personal lobbying by several powerful senators persuaded Lincoln to sign the legislation, which he did on August 6, 1861. Due to the fact that the bill was based on military emancipation, no judicial proceedings were required, and therefore Lincoln gave Attorney General Edward Bates no instructions on enforcing the bill. Within a year of its passage, tens of thousands of slaves had been freed by the first Confiscation Act. Now remember, this is 1861 now. They're saying tens of thousands of slaves had been freed by this act. With respect to slaves, the act authorized court proceedings to strip their owners of any claim to them, but did not clarify whether the slaves were free. Warning, warning, warning. Put your hard hats on, boulders finna drop. As a result of this ambiguity, these slaves came under Union lines as property in care of the U.S. government. Again, as a result of this ambiguity, these slaves came under Union lines as property in the care of the U.S. government. Sounds familiar?
So can we stop for a second and really talk about what that means? Because think about this. A lot of this was going on as people were trying to purchase land, hold on to land, get settled in a new identity, and we're still worried about being moved to Oklahoma or just actually being shipped off to Africa to colonize. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Bones.
It says, in response to this situation, General David Hunter, the Union Army military commander of Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, issued General Order Number 11 on May 9, 1862, freeing all slaves in areas under his command. Upon hearing of Hunter's action 1 week later, Lincoln immediately countermanded the order, thus returning the slaves to their former status as property in the care of the federal government. Again, General Order Number 11 on May 9, 1862, freeing all slaves in areas under his command. Upon hearing of Hunter's action 1 week later, Lincoln immediately countermanded this order, thus returning the slaves to their former status as property in the care of the federal government. Isn't that a war to the state? I'm just saying, though.
Yeah, it is. And the way they paint the picture is that the North was doing the slaves a favor. Now you see what kind of favor they were offering. It was a land grab. Go ahead.
It goes on to state, before the act was passed, Benjamin Franklin Butler had been the first Union general to declare slaves as contraband. Again, before the act was passed, Benjamin Franklin Butler had been the first Union general to declare slaves as contraband. Some other Northern commanders followed his precedent. While officers from the border states were more likely to return escaped slaves to their masters, the Confiscation Act was an attempt to set a consistent policy throughout the Army. And that's the first Confiscation Act. Post the second one in the chat.
Hold on, before you do that, man. Hold on. We gotta clear the blast area, man. Cause you ain't fair. You just dropping stuff and people can't even recover. Hold on, slow down. So clear the blast area. Clear the blast area. Clear the cotton picking blast area. And I need 2 more of these. 1 more and I'm done. Let people know that they're in the construction area, because this is about to get crazy.
Golden Moon said, what's contraband?
All right, Bones. I think we're ready now. I try to give y'all some time to recover. I'm just saying.
All right. Let me post this in the chat. All right. This is
That's
the
making me wonder
second
about Oliver North.
Say again, Free.
So that's making me wonder about Oliver North and those Contra hearings. Might need to look at what they're classifying as contraband.
Good.
This is interesting.
Posted the Confiscation Act of 1862. All right, the Confiscation Act of 1862, or Second Confiscation Act, was a law passed by the United States Congress during the American Civil War. Section 13 of the act formed the legal basis for President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Again, it says Section 13 of the act formed the legal basis for President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. It says, nature of the law. The Confiscation Act was passed on July 17, 1862. The defining characteristics of the act was that it called for court proceedings to procedure of land and property from disloyal citizens, supporters of the Confederacy, in the South, as well as the emancipation of their slaves that came under Union control. Under this act, conviction of treason against the U.S. could be punishable by death or carry a minimum prison sentence of 5 years and a minimum fine of $10,000. This law also stated that any citizen convicted of aiding and abetting any person known to have committed treason against the United States could be imprisoned for up to 10 years and face a maximum fine of $200,000. Hold on.
Stop. So, Emancipation. This set forth the legality of the Emancipation Proclamation. But what followed after the Emancipation Proclamation? The 13th Amendment. What did the 13th Amendment do? Change slavery to a prison sentence, right? So they're already setting up their tenets for prison.
Yeah, they said this is the predecessor to the Emancipation Proclamation. The thing that got me was this. The person doing the crime are being caught of treason, punishable by death or carry a minimum prison sentence of 5 years and a minimum fine of $10,000. But now the person that got caught helping them, up to 10 years and face a maximum fine of $200,000.
So you were encouraged to snitch.
You might as well do the crime instead of help with the crime. They say, if convicted, this law specifically targeted the seizure of property of any Confederate military officer, Confederate public officer holder, person who have taken any oath of allegiance to the Confederacy, or any citizenship of a loyal Union state who has given aid or support to any of the aforementioned traitors to the United States of America. I'm going to read this again because there's a catch in here. I want to see if y'all catch it. This law specifically targets the seizure of property of any Confederate military officer, Confederate public officer holder, person who have taken an oath of allegiance to the Confederacy, or any citizenship of a loyal Union state who has given aid or support to any other aforementioned traitors to the United States of America. Basically, if you didn't have to support them, if your state did, they can take your property and land.
That's egregious.
Y'all seeing it? Y'all see the picture? Y'all see what's going on? So now you could come in the South and say, okay, y'all was living here in the South during the war. Y'all was helping these people. So we got to take your land and everything you got, and you got to leave.
So who was the North really helping?
It goes further on the state.
But before we do that, here's a question: How many of the Confederate soldiers that were Europeans end up being tried? Their property seized and confiscated because they were the ones that fought against the Union. What about the then president the Confederacy. Did he get hung? Did he get tried for treason? I'll wait. Go ahead.
It goes on to state, this act helped the Union military because freed slaves could supply the forces with information to gain a strategic advantage over the Confederates. One slave, March Haynes, began smuggling slaves to the freedom of the Union lines with the help of Union General Quincy Adams Gilmore.
Stop.
In return for his help...
Stop. You don't do that. Stop that. Dude, come on. What? Hold on, bruh. Stop. Slow down. So basically, it said this act helped the Union military because free slaves could supply the forces with information to gain a strategic advantage of the Confederates. Was this the beginning of the Underground Railroad?
Which is weird. This is 1862. Why would you need to be... Let me hush.
No, say what you got to say.
Emancipation 1863. They already stated in the first Confiscation Act it frees tens of thousands of slaves. But all these acts that happened before the emancipation, there shouldn't be no more slaves.
But you got to remember, they didn't have the internet. Word didn't travel that fast. So they could have been free. They didn't know they was free.
Oh, they were semi-free. They just became property of the state. What it said, it freed all of them, making them basically ward to the state.
Right. Because now they're unintentionally, but intentionally, accomplices to treason against the Union. So now they are contraband. So any spoils of war, i.e. contraband, can be taken. So these individuals were spoils of war, and either they were taken, and for those that didn't want to go, their land was going to be confiscated. Land was going to be confiscated anyway for the mere fact that they were in the Confederate state. So it was so like somebody put in the chat, it was a catch-22. You know, you darned if you do, you darned if you don't. Either way, you screwed. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Goes on to state, one slave, March Haynes, began smuggling slaves to the freedom of the Union lines with the help of Union General Quincy Adams Gilmore. In return for his help, Haynes provided Gilmore with exact and valuable information on the location of Confederate defenses and the strength of their forces.
So here's another question. Could these individuals have been some of the Buffalo Soldiers too?
Yeah, the Confiscation Acts was so dangerous. I remember we was reading out from the book last night. Got to break it down so we can make it accessible to everyone. Where it stated that the Freedmen's Bureau got affected by this. That they lost, over 80 plantations?
Yep.
Because of confiscation? 80 plantation homes got taken away from the Freedmen's Bureau. Not to say how much money that was taken. Basically, these two laws allowed the North to come through the South and break up the South and reconstruct it to how they wanted it. We got to remember, it's called reconstructing. What were they reconstructing?
The borders, land ownership, redistribution of wealth, and we must point out, how is all this important and prevalent today? We know that this was a problem. We know that this problem existed. So how does that affect us today? How does that affect us knowing that this took place? If it does nothing else, Grand Rising Iron Flying Squirrel, if it does nothing else, it highlights the importance of you doing your genealogy. Because by doing your genealogy and proving that the only reason that your ancestors were considered black was because they were duped or tricked so they could keep their land and they lost their land anyway, now you have a leg to stand on. Now you have the ability to combat what's been done and rectify. If you don't do your genealogy, then by law you are considered black. You are considered African American. You are considered Negro. Because just saying that you are not does not prove anything. You have to do your genealogy. And the reason why we keep stressing that is because all the presidents know their genealogy. All of the House and the Senate know their genealogy. You can't be a Huguenot if you don't know your genealogy. So if everybody knows their genealogy and they can tell you where they descend from, and then they give us the right or the ability, in air quotes, to self-identify, the thing that they can point to is, well, we can prove where we came from. Then the only thing we ask you to do is prove where you came from. So merely stating that you are autochthonous, which is a French word, indigenous, which is a French word, Indian, which is part of a French word, it doesn't matter what you state. You have to be able to prove it. And the best way to prove it is through your genealogy and family tree. Because nothing can be rectified until you prove where you came from. Because here's the thing. The only thing keeping you from being recognized as a real black Irish, a real black European, is your genealogy. Because there were black Europeans and black Irish that came over here, black Turks that came over here. So they were immigrants. So if you don't prove who you are, you by default are them, because your ancestors, whether they were tricked or whether they were forced or coerced into claiming this identity, this is what they said that they were. So the only way to prove that that was the case and that you're not descendants of a black Irish or a black Turk or a black Dutch is to do your genealogy. Period, point blank in discussion.
Big fact.
So
if you don't know who you are, what Thomas just said is major. Bottom line.
So that's where everything starts. So, you can sign all the paperwork that you want. You can put all the petitions that you want. When they slap you upside the head with that, your ancestors claim that they were black Dutch or black Irish. Where's your proof that you didn't? So that could be the determining factor of whether you qualify for ADOS or not. I'm just saying. Something to think about.
Yeah, I was in the background reading further on the Confiscation Act of 1862. I'm going to read Section 9 for everyone.
Go ahead, boss.
It says, "It be further enacted that all slaves of persons who shall hereafter be engaged in rebellion against the government of the United States, or who shall in any way give aid or comfort thereto, escaping from such persons and taking refuge within the lines of the army, and all slaves captured from such persons are deserted by them, and coming under the control of the government of the United States, and all slaves of such persons found on or being with any place occupied by rebel forces and afterwards occupied by the forces of the United States shall be deemed captives of war." I'm going to say this again. United States and all slaves of such persons found on or being within any place occupied by rebel forces and afterwards occupied by the forces of the United States shall be deemed captives of war and shall be forever free of their servitude and not again held as slaves. They made them POWs.
Prisoners of war. I am Flying Squirrel says, "We are at war at home. Never forget that." The Darian Woods says, "Come on, man. pawns. We pawns too. Some of us are.
PLW.
And we'll go further into section 10. Interesting. Section 10 starts as, it be it further enacted that no slave escaping into any state, territory, or district of Columbia from any other state shall be delivered up or in any way impeded or hindered of his liberty, except for crime or some offense against the laws, unless the person claiming said fugitive shall first make oath that the person to whom the labor or service of such fugitive is alleged to be due is his lawful owner, and has not been borne arms against the United States in the present rebellion, nor in any way given aid and comfort thereto, and no person engaged in the military or naval service of the United States shall, under any pretense whatsoever, assume to decide on the validity of the claim of any person to the service or labor of any other person, or surrender up any such person to the claimant on pain of being dismissed from the service. Wow. So basically, they can just come down in the South and just be like, okay, these people slaves, we freeing them. Y'all POWs now, come on.
Copper Color Queen says, I'm blown away at this information, driving into work every morning, listening to the nuggets that y'all are finding out. This latest series of information has me thinking of how it all makes sense, on how they don't want on how they don't want us knowing what they did. Again, this goes back to the reason why genealogy is so important, because if we don't know exactly what was done and how it was done, we can't fix it.
Y'all,
go ahead.
Tighten up them seat belts. I'm gonna read section 11 and 12. Fair warning. 11 starts. And be it further enacted that the President of the United States is authorized to employ as many persons of African descent as he may deem necessary and proper for the suppression of this rebellion. And for this purpose, he may organize and use them in such manner as he may judge best for the public welfare. We'll read 11 again. And be it further enacted that the President of the United States is authorized to employ as many persons of African descent as he may deem necessary and proper for the suppression of this rebellion, and for the purpose he may organize and use them in such manner as he may judge best for the public welfare. Section 12.
Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. Stop. Keyword: African descent.
Mm-hmm.
Bingo.
By declaring yourself Black Dutch and Black Irish, Black Slav, because that's what that is, Black slave, you are declaring African descent. I don't care how you switch it up or how you look at it, because many of them came from Southwest Africa by way of Europe. So let's not forget that. So by our ancestors claiming that, and then by the 14th Amendment declaring everybody a citizen, which basically means they're no longer Indian, that puts you in that category of Black Irish, Black Dutch, Black European, Black Slav, Black slave. That's how Section 11 affected. It still affects not only our ancestors, who are the copper-colored American Indians, but us to this day. I'm sorry, Bones, go ahead.
No problem. Dropping down to Section 12, tighten up them hard hats. And it be further enacted that the President of the United States is hereby authorized to make provisions for the transportation, colonization, and settlement in some tropical country beyond the limits of the United States. I'm going to read this again. This is Section 12 of the Second Confiscation Act, 1862. And it be further enacted that the President of the United States is hereby authorized to make provision for the transportation, colonization, and settlement in some tropical country beyond the limits of the United States of such persons of the African race made freely by the provisions of this act, as may be willing to emigrate with an E, having first obtained the consent of the government of said country to their protection and settlement within the same with all the rights and privileges of freemen. Don't this sound familiar?
Sounds like involuntary/voluntary colonization of the islands.
They stated in here some tropical country beyond the limits of the United States.
So they're basically admitting that Abraham Lincoln was responsible for sending many, ain't no telling how many, of our ancestors over to the islands, or as they say, some tropical country beyond the limits of the United States.
That's a whole. Let me.
They could have sent them to Africa. Africa's considered tropical, right? I'm just saying.
Well, we know they did because this is 1862. And remember, they also said the first and second confiscation acts are the predecessors to the emancipation.
So who were they emancipating?
Well, let's remember what emancipation really means. If a child emancipated from their parents, all that's saying is they don't have to follow the rules and regulations of their parents. But now if that child does not leave that house, then that child falls back under the rules and regulations of the parents of that household. So if your state or your country emancipates you, you're free to go. But if you don't go, you fall up under the rules and jurisdiction of said government. That's all emancipation basically means.
So you made a great point. So what happens, and Free can probably explain this better. What happens if a child, aka a minor, needs to be emancipated, but is held against their will, and the state finds out? What happens to said child? Or what could potentially happen to said child?
Well, then automatically, of course, the state would intervene and would try to retrieve the child out of the home. And if the child is able to take care of themselves, then they can possibly proceed with emancipation. And if not, then they look into like the foster system, like placing them with a family.
Say that last part again.
They look at placing them with a family. They basically become a ward of the state, and they look to place them with a family. If they're unable to take care of themselves.
Right. And the state makes that determination, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So when these sections got enacted and they made these individuals contraband, they became a ward of the state or the union. And the union was able to come in, take them, determine whether or not they were able to get this information, determine whether or not they were able to live on their own, and then just basically ship them where they needed them to go based off of these sections. So that's why I said that.
Micro, macro.
Exactly.
Well, you can see their fingerprints all over the place and things repeating over and over and over again. I'm sorry, Bon. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it shows how it was done and what was done. Because how would a Northern soldier know what families helped the South? How would you know? How would you know what household troops were staying at? How would you know who gave them ammunition? How?
Grand Rising,
What, you
Mr.
walk through the
TJ.
neighborhood? You went through the neighborhood playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo?
Land
And if they
grab.
was taking
That's all it's
land
about.
and if they were taking land and property, money and gold, why are we only hearing about melanated people becoming wards? So where are all these Europeans that were losing their property?
Mm-hmm.
Was it disguised as you was going for every people who supported the Southerners, but really the plan was to go after the melanated landowners?
It's very possible. Grand Rising.
It's funny how it.
I'm sorry, Bones. I just want to great celestial love, Grand Rising. Somebody else came. Oh yeah, Grand Rising, Mr. TJ. Glad y'all was able to catch the cab with us this rising. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bones.
No, I was just saying it's funny when you study Louisiana, you can see it happened there. Then the same thing they did in Louisiana, you can see how they spread it across the nation. The same template.
Yeah. But Darren was said, this is crazy. I knew Lincoln was bad, but this bad, y'all, I don't know. I don't like him now. I can't stand him.
Yeah, and that make you think that he did something great for our people. But how many of us before this rising even knew about a Confiscation Act? And that there's two of them. And he signed it. Both of them. But then again, we got to take people from when they say it. When you read his address about the emancipation, what he said, he had no plan to free the Negro. If he could put the Union back together and not one Negro be so-called free, he would do it. It had nothing to do with us. They wanted money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because again, remember, they need to pay for all these wars. They still owe France a grip of dough. And every war that's fought, somebody's got to get paid. And when reading and going over the American Indian Wars, there was always a war going on. We've been at war since they got here. So we've always been in debt to somebody. So, again, the problem is the infiltration of the Huguenots into the KKK and causing this mayhem and confusion. How do we rectify it? You can't do anything until you know who you are and where you come from, because that sets the foundation for everything you do from then on. If you find out that your ancestors were actually Black Dutch, Black Irish, or had some African ancestry, you're not going to be moving the same way you would had you found out your ancestors were of American Indian, copper-colored American Indian descent. And here's the funny thing about it. They know who you are. If they know who they are, and they got genealogists, just like we have genealogists, they know who you are. The problem is you don't know who you are. So when you go and start making these claims about being autochthonous, like I said, French word, indigenous, like I said, French word, all these words that we use to describe ourselves as French words that you can't prove based off your genealogy who you are, don't be surprised if you get shipped off somewhere, popping off at the mouth. Because this is going to be a one particular time where proof will be a problem if you don't have it. And it's going to be your problem.
And that shouldn't be a hard thing to figure out. That's like winning the lotto. And an hour after you win the lotto, you get a whole bunch of people popping up at your door talking some of your cousins. Hey, you gonna ask for proof? Oh, you gonna break bread? Come on, man. Oh, man, I don't know you. Oh, this your auntie. I don't know her either. Start calling some relatives. You're gonna need proof.
Everything starts with knowing who you are. So that's why this is pertinent and why this is important. That's the reason why this information is being exposed, so we know who did what and why, and now we can undo it.
Mm-hmm.
Because this
you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Exactly. And this information is in the archives. So it's not like they're hiding it. You can't sit there and go, well, no, we didn't do that. Oh, yes, you did. It's in your own writing. It's in your own archives. The problem is people don't want to do the work because it's work. Offering 50 free sites and then all the information based off of the states and then contact information for all the tribes. It can't be any easier than that opposed to somebody doing it for you. And I'm here to tell you, no one's going to do it for you. So we've taken away all the excuses. So the genealogy, your family tree, not DNA, but your family tree is going to be the starting foundation to alleviate you being declared or you being confirmed as an African American descendant or American Indian or Native American or whatever. So that's the solution. You might not like it, but that's the solution. Because they're going to ask you to prove who you are. So I'm off my soapbox. My bad, Bones. Go ahead.
And I don't understand why we have a problem with that. You work for 2 weeks. You get a check. Your job knows you. You know it's you. But when you go to this bank, don't you still got to show proof to cash that check?
Mm-hmm.
Don't, when you pay bills, you have to give an account number to showing proof that that's your account?
Yes, you do.
To get a home, an automobile, to do the majority of things in this country, you have to show some form of ID. Whether it's going to a club, going to a bar, you have to show some form of ID to prove it. Why are we willing to prove it when it comes to everything that can hurt us? But the one thing that can help us, we refuse to want to prove it. That don't make sense to me.
Somebody got into our head and said we shouldn't have to prove anything. I'm going to tell you about that land that should. That land that should is getting our ancestors beat down mercilessly. That land that should is getting people shot mercilessly. That land that should is having people incarcerated without proper justice. That land that should is getting people profiled. So keep living in the land that should if you want to. Eventually, you're going to have to come out of that land of should and go into the land of what is, or you will find yourself incarcerated either on this continent or off this continent. Keep staying in the land of should if you want to.
Proof should never be a problem. If we allow proof to be a problem to where we can see the proof and we turn away from it, we are no better.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't the conscious community started off based off of show and prove? Wasn't that a mantra at one particular time, or am I missing something?
Mm-hmm.
So when did it come from show and prove to I show up and I am proof? When did that happen? Did that happen around the same time that we took on the identity of African American? Did it happen at the same time that we took on the identity of Negro or Black Dutch or Black Irish? Is that when that happened? I'm confused.
That's all I'm saying. Same people who say you don't need proof, say that Friday when you go in that bank to cash that paycheck. I bet you won't say it then.
I don't know, man. this is what I will say to that. If you can show me, but that's a proof thing. If you can prove to me that you don't need to show proof in order to correct this, and it works, then you got it. But you have to show me proof. Everybody has a camera on their phone, but people do a lot of talking, but there ain't a whole lot of proving. That's some fraudulent stuff to me. Talk, no proof. And I don't
And
know
then
about
wonder why.
Go ahead.
And wonder why we can't move forward. To move forward, that means we have to drop a lot of these bad habits, a lot of these negative traits. We must drop them off. We can't take it with us and expecting the things to be better. Nowhere does that work.
And again, for those of you who are just coming on, we've talked about what has happened with ReCONstruction and how the Huguenots had infiltrated the KKK, and how President Lincoln signed the Confiscation Act that allowed not only our ancestors, who are the copper-colored American Indians, to lose their land, but many of them end up being removed from the land because of the Confiscation Act. Lost their land because of the Confiscation Act. Got relocated because of the Confiscation Act. So it basically goes to show you that the North did not have our best interests at heart. We would have been better off staying in the South, fighting just to keep the land that we had as Indians, instead of declaring that we were Black Dutch, Black Irish, or some form of Black European. But, it's easy for me to sit here and pontificate and play Monday morning quarterback and say what they should have did, because, I wasn't going through what they was going through. But in hindsight, that's what happened. Golden Moon says, why the phone started to take pictures by itself? Well, I wish some of these people that's claiming all these actions, their phones would take pictures by themselves and capture them getting some of this stuff done that they claiming. That's what I wish. So
it's kind of funny that going back listening to what he tried to tell you, our people were lazy. They ended up on government subsidies because they didn't have skill sets. They weren't educated. No, because you took their land and forced them to be wards of the states. Nasty.
Facts. Man. Who want to choke something?
Well, again, we're showing you the problem, and as always, we're going to give you the solution. Now, you might not like the solution, but it's a solution nonetheless. And you can debate the solution if you want to, but you can't disprove the solution, because there are Indians on their own reservations and off their reservations that don't have to worry about being shot up. They don't have to worry about being taxed like the African American citizens. So we already know, and these are melanated, swarthy, ruddy individuals that are protected under the same laws that protect the Native Americans. So don't come with me with that BS that it's only protecting a certain amount of people, or it's only protecting the European looking people, because that's not true. And if it is true, prove it. Pictures would be nice, conversations would be better, and recording would be awesome. So there's proof that it works. There's proof that tying in your tribe and find out who you are works and protects you and protects your relatives. Now I'm looking for other proof. I'm sorry, go ahead, Bones.
I had a conversation this weekend with somebody, and I had to ask them, out of over 1,500 tribes, why people always focus on the 5? Why does everybody focus on the 5 well-known ones? Like outside of them, the other ones don't exist? We don't want any.
Welcome back, Copper. What you got, brother?
Drive it like it's hot.
I posted a couple things in the back chat. I'm not sure if you guys got a chance to have to jump off and take a conference call, but I posted a couple things in the back chat that may be related to what we're talking about and tying the Huguenots to some of these groups, these organizations.
Oh yes, I see it.
Yeah, I tried to provide links, but the problem with that was I was unable to copy them because the site that posted it said do not reproduce these, so they didn't want to make the images savable, and I can kind of see why. So for the viewing audience that can't see these, at least not yet, because these will be put up. If you look up the Knights Templar cross, you're going to see a cross that is sitting inside of a crown, like a royal crown. And there is, it's in the shape of a cross, like almost like the Maltese cross. And there's an insignia that is in Latin, in hoc signo vinces, right? Which means in English, in this sign thou shalt conquer. That cross, the crown, is the sign of conquest. And this was, you can find this if you look up, like I said, the Knights Templar cross.
So Copper. Now I have it on my screen. Is it okay for me to share it, or you suggest I don't?
Oh no, you can find that with a Google search. So absolutely, you can share that.
All right.
The one I wasn't able to get a link for is the second one, because that insignia without the Maltese cross on the outside of it is the Knights of the Golden Circle insignia. Same thing. It just has the initials KGC. Now, if you do a Google search,
they're the same.
They are the same. So this is your tie. We spoke before in a previous show about the Knights Templar and their relation to the Huguenots. So this is tying all of this together to show you that you're seeing the same groups reincorporating, changing brands, changing names, but showing you that there's a lineage, that there's a connection. When you look at these white supremacist groups, they are almost all Christian groups. That's not, again, this is not to say the Christians are necessarily bad people or anything like that. You're just seeing a group utilize or coalesce around a cause, and in this case, religion, using that cross as a sign of conquest. This is the reason why you saw not only the conquistadores, when they showed up in Central and South America, burning crosses to claim the area for Spain or Portugal or one of those places, or Holland or whatever have you, and these people who are the white supremacists in the 19th century and into the 20th century, burning crosses in people's yards. It is the same thing. These are the same people.
Like Macadon. No, that's Golden Moon in the chat. Said X marks the spot. You look at it as a cross. You lay it down, that's an X. Kind of funny. Every place they stuck it, that's where they went and took resources and terrorized the natural population. Every place they stuck it in the ground.
And when you look at treasure maps, what do they indicate where the gold is or where the treasure is? They indicate it with a red X, right?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
It's an X or a tau, correct?
Yep, the tau cross, and you see that as well.
Again, we're not intimating, hinting, or indicating that all organizations are Christian based or affiliated, or all Christian organizations are affiliated. What we're saying is that there are certain organizations that are. So Please take that with that understanding. This is not implicating all organizations, but there are specific organizations that hide under the cross of Christianity, this being one of them.
Lady Free brings up an exquisite point. I do say exquisite deliberately. There are treasure map signs that were created for the Knights of the Golden Circle. I'm going to post this in the back chat. Thomas, if you'd like to share this group, by all means. Let's see here. This is. So when we look at the Knights of the Golden Circle, and we look at their relation to the Knights Templar, what were the Knights Templar keepers of? Treasure. These were some of your first bankers, at least in the modern sense, because these were people who charged a tariff or a tax for you to be able to cross across Europe into Western Asia. So they amassed a large amount of wealth, and there was a lot of gold. If you ever watch Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, it shows you the treasures that the Templars knew about. The Knights of the Golden Circle are no different. There's a large amount of confiscated wealth that these people understood and knew about, and part of that was keeping with the legacy of the Knights Templar. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'll go ahead and post this here as well. You guys should be able to see this. It's a blog spot post, but you can see where there is some talk about the similarities between these two groups. So I'm going to read a little passage from this if I could. Several years ago, I was privileged to work with a group of treasure hunters that had discovered a contractual agreement between the leaders of the Knights of the Golden Circle, the KGC, and Jesse James. So now we're going out west. Jesse James was not an outlaw in the traditional sense of the word. He was working for a little under $250 per month to rob the Union. Or the bad guy.
Say it again, Copper. Say it again just in case they missed it.
Jesse James was employed. He wasn't an outlaw. He was employed $250 a month. It was a lot of money back then. To rob the Union or the bad guys.
That's why he was celebrated so much and still to this day.
Exactly. So think about the remark I just made a little earlier about who our heroes are, right? Or who we're told our heroes are. Now it says, "In using the money to restore the New World, so territories in Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean to be included in the United States as slave states." They wanted to expand the slave territory of the United States, or what was termed the slave state, the Golden Crescent, or the good guys. If you look at it in that respect, you will begin to think more like the KGC people and understand why they did what they did. Then you can understand why the treasures were hidden with a large cache that was protected by the Sentinel, and why there were at least 2 small caches for the Sentinel to get paid from if conventional pay wasn't forthcoming for some reason. These people were preparing for change. This is why there are death traps with the large cache, and there are no death traps with the small cache. If you do not understand the death traps of the large caches, I would strongly advise you to not tamper with them. A small cache or 2 would allow you to live modestly for some time. A large cache may not allow you to live at all. We will discuss death traps in a later article. But this is interesting stuff. And there's links here further down talk about more archives on the Knights of the Golden Circle. So this isn't just symbology they're giving you. Golden Circle means something. And when you start talking about these groups, these institutions that were put together, They don't just show you these signs for no reason. These signs mean something. When they talk about golden circles and goldenness and being knights and protecting things, they mean it. But I think one thing that's striking is how they were able to rob people. So you have the KGC robbing the union. You have the union robbing the KGC, and by proxy, landowners, like Bones mentioned, how they started confiscating land and property and commodities. So everybody's stealing from everybody else. But the Knights of the Golden Circle have an agenda to move and expand their influence into Central and eventually South America.
Clear the blast area. Clear the blast area. Clear the cotton picking blast area. I need 4 blasts on this one. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm done. And Antonio told us at the end of the day, is it possible to summarize the whole timeline, or at least once a month, so I can update my final exam notes? That's why we have the forum, Antonio. But for you, we'll summarize right now. Basically, what it boils down to is we have the ReCONstruction Act, and last week we talked about how one aspect of the ReCONstruction Act was placing us under financial and economic slavery. That was those that were left here. This week, starting today, we found out that the Huguenots had a large role in the Ku Klux Klan, meaning that they infiltrated the Klan, set up organizations, and were instrumental in ushering in a new form of terrorism against our ancestors, in addition to the 2 confiscation acts, one of 1861 and one of 1862, that not only took our ancestors' property, but made them wards of the state, and in some cases caused them to be shipped to tropical lands outside of the United States. And if that wasn't bad enough, those that were fortunate enough, and I'm using air quotes, to stay up north, as you know from last week, they were placed in a position to where they were in a project with the Jewish community, and they were sold land or sold property that was bad, and they couldn't get out of it because of redlining, and they end up being forced into projects like the Cabrini Greens in Chicago. So all this is going on simultaneously. So to wrap it up in a nice little bow, we always tell you the problem first, and then we wrap it up with a solution. It's interesting how the solution does not change, especially with a Doctor's Assembly. Find out who you are. Find out who your ancestors were. Find out where you fit within the scheme so you'll know how to move. Because if not, someone else will determine your outcome. Simple and plain. It's already been proven that finding your ancestry will help and protect you. You have copper-colored melanated Indians who are already protected and are not facing the same things as people claiming to be African Americans, Negroes, or straight up black. And for those of the naysayers, all I'm saying, just prove what you're talking about. Prove that it works. There's plenty Indians, American Indians, who have found their ancestors that are not subject to the same things that African Americans, Negroes, and blacks are subject to. So that's already been proven. All I'm saying is that's a method. That's a method that we know that works. So that's a solution that we're suggesting and we're pointing to. There are other solutions. I don't know if any of them work, and I haven't seen any proof of them working. So if you have some proof, please provide it. Visual and audio would be nice. Or some type of, document that can be, backed up and verified. So hopefully, Antonio, that helps out, and hopefully that catches everybody up that came in late. But we definitely appreciate y'all for listening. So I relinquish the mic.
Tony don't got no sense.
I know, right?
Tonyo, get on the forum. Stop playing.
Grand Rising, Kefra. Forgive me if I mispronounce your name. KHEPHRA. I think that's Kefra. Grand Rising. Glad you was able to catch the cab today.
Grand Rising, Kefra.
So is there anything that we want to touch on before we let these amazing people get out to their community and get on with their life today? I think we've hit them upside the head with enough haymakers. Now they got to recover. Pamela asked, she said, so what we going to do and when are we going to get started in fixing this? Well, Pamela, like I said, you're already starting and you're a lot further than most. So continue to do your genealogy, tie in, find out where your family are from, and just continue with that format. And again, remember, we also have mechanisms in place. Not we, but we've posted mechanisms that's been in place since, in some instances, the 1940s, some since 1968, that's going to allow us to be financially independent. HUD Section 3, USDA, and there are many other programs that are specifically designed for us to help us, which would basically be considered Indian reparations. But people aren't applying for them. And we're putting them out and we're looking to help people, but we can't make people do anything. So it's up to everybody to do what you can. And, one, do your genealogy. Two, look for ways to find that property that you can actually get or acquiesce and help your relatives in your tribe. I mean, again, that's a solution. That's a solution that we know that works. That does not mean that is the solution. So please do not misunderstand us when we say this. These are solutions that we bringing about that we know for a fact that works. We have people that have used them, that have been using them, and have success with using them. So we're not speculating, we're not guessing, and we're not making up stuff. This stuff can be proven. Numerous documentation, numerous facts, numerous audio, numerous video. So again, it's a solution, not the solution. Golden Moon said it right. Don't know who you are? Genealogy is the key. That's where you have to start. That's the best place to start. Anybody else got anything they want to say before we sign off? Or do our salutation, excuse me.
Yeah, I think I'll make a remark and use this as my salutation. Golden Moon mentioned Robin Hood. Robin of Locksley. Okay. Robin of Locksley was part of the group that went to fight in the Crusades. That makes him part of the Knights Templar. That's what we're seeing. Golden Moon hit this all the way on the head. And we are seeing groups, whether related or not, who are essentially promoting and sustaining the legacy of these folks. For better or for worse, I'm not going to weigh in on the morality of which. that you're seeing the line begin to blur between what we've been told and what actually was going on. Especially when you start seeing articles that are talking about Jesse James fighting for the good guys, being the Knights of the Golden Circle, and stealing wealth from that big bad union that's working to oppress them. It's always been a strange story of the perspective of the Civil War and the aftermath and the groups involved. And so as we dig through this, we begin to see friend become foe and foe become friend in certain situations. We have to remember this as we go through all of this material. This won't be the last time we hear about this, but as we go through it, we should keep that in mind and understand that you either die the hero, to quote The Dark Knight, you either die the hero or you live long enough to become the villain. Everybody's on both sides of everything. And so what does that leave us? Remember we said before, we have to operate as if we have no friends. We do not. Everybody wants something because they're on our land. You know, they're utilizing and benefiting from our culture, our ways, our history, even assuming it for themselves. So you have a lot of people who work in an interest that's shared with us. You have a lot of people who work against our interest. And we need to be mindful of this as we take to this material and try to make sense of it. And with that, I yield the mic.
All right. Thank you, Copper. Definitely appreciate you. Lady Free, what you got for us?
Well, the narrative we've been given, we've been force-fed all these years, it's obviously a lie. So find your truth. Realize your destiny by doing your genealogy. Remember who you are and begin to change the world and restore your people. Much love.
All right. No sellout. What you got for the people, boss?
Mic check. Mic check. Peace to everybody in the chat that showed up today. Are we giving salutations right now? Yeah. The links are going to be posted in the chat. Please log on to the forum if you have any other questions. Proof is not a problem.
All right. Patrick Gabriel was talking about the problem with their great grandma was full-blooded Indian in South Carolina, but she has no last name, and her great aunt said her tribe started with an A. Well, Patrick, as you know, as Through the Vision, aka James Flame, aka Choctaw Jimmy, was telling us that none of our ancestors who were copper color American Indians had last names. So what you can do is reach out to us at attackthesassembly.com or go into the forum and place that information in there, register of course, and then place that information in there and see what resources that we have available free of charge, of course, that can actually help you with that. Again, we are all growing in this information. There are no quote-unquote experts or no quote-unquote senior scholars. So as we grow and share this information, is to help everybody. So if you would register in the forum at attackthesassembly.com and put that information, what you're looking for in the back, the more information you can provide, the better and easier it is for us to help you, because there are many people who are also on the same path that you are, and with listening to the videos and audios and doing the research, you will start to unlock your ancestry, your family tree. So hopefully that helps, and I'm sure No Sellout will put that information in the chat again so you can access it. So hopefully that helps. With that being said, again, at the Tactics Assembly, our goal is to help you with your genealogy. We're not concerned with a narrative that says that, or we're not pushing an agenda or a narrative that says everybody is American Indian or everybody is a slave or what have you. We're all about helping you do your genealogy and connect with your relatives. That's what we're here. That's our first priority. The bills that we do, the information that we present is in aid of that because it answers questions that may not have been answered had we not done this. Or it may have taken you longer to come across it by yourself. That's the reason why the chat is so important. So I want to thank the chat for their constant input and always providing the information and helping the new people that come in the chat, make them feel at home. Thank you for all you do and also providing information to the forum and making it do what it do and also keeping us on our toes and making sure we stay accountable. I want to thank the new subscribers and I also want to thank those that are in the chat, that are not in the chat but are listening, because you make up the bulk of the listeners. And just because we don't hear from it, that don't mean your contributions of listening are any less important. So we want to thank you for that. Again, the Tactics Assembly, we're about helping. We're not about telling you who you are and getting into your personal business. But we are about getting the information correct. Remember, it's about getting it right and not about us being right. So I want to say thank you to everybody, especially the panel, because y'all make what I do a lot easier. And with that, I will relinquish the mic to Bones H. McCoy so he can give his salutations and then take us out. I relinquish the mic.
All right. Peace to the panel and the chat. Like we say, this information, another headache coming. But we're going to get through it. It's just more information, like TMA said, that help a lot of us find out what happened to our ancestors or why we can't find some of them on particular records. And like we always say, we all do this together, it becomes easier. We all carry one of these pebbles, nobody stuck with a boulder in the end. Also reminding everyone, AINT TV, which stands for American Indian Network Television, is up and running. It's 24/7, and you can access that from the Tactics Assembly website, as well as there's a couple of USDA programs, and there's many more that'll be posted up in the forum. These are programs for individuals. Look and see which ones apply to your area so you can start working on becoming self-sufficient. And like we always say, all this information does no one no good if we do not use it and apply it to better ourselves. So on that note, it's always fun when we get to kick it with the relatives. No place we'd rather be. And until tomorrow's Rising Show, everyone have a very, very blissful day and peace.
Peace, everyone.
Peace, everybody.
Peace, y'all.
Mm-hmm.